So welcome back. A few questions and answers I'd like to try and do for you guys. Firstly, huge thank you to all your comments. I'm really kind of bowled over by your sentiments and how you really made me feel this video was worthwhile doing, because that was the number one aim, was to try and share what I've learned. And also, I'm really pleased that you've asked me some really interesting questions, because if there wasn't the questions, I'd be thinking that was a waste of time doing all that, because it's just gone in one ear out the other. But it seems not. I really hope you can follow this video I did and get something out of it. That was my number one goal. So I've made a list. It's here and it's pretty extensive, but I'll just try and briefly answer some of your questions. First question is, can I recombine the colony on day 5 as soon as the cells are capped and then use it as a finisher? Yes, of course you can. The whole reason for doing this process like I do it is to try and explain that it's so flexible. If you don't want to run a second or third group of cells, you can just wait till they're capped on day 5 and reassemble the colony. You might only want to raise 20 queen cells or 30 queen cells, and you can use a few less bees and a few less frames of brood to stock that already strong colony. It's up to you. What I'm trying to explain is the degree of flexibility is huge. You do it to suit your needs, okay? So yes, you can reassemble on day 5, and then you use it as a finisher, so you reassemble with the queen excluder in place above the top of the queen right colony, and then the queen cannot get up and tear those cells down above the excluder. So you must have the excluder in place. If you don't, she'll kill the cells. Simple as that. The next question is a little bit more complicated, and it's, why do I remove the cells in this specific case after 24 hours? For about 3 reasons, but for the main reason is, as I tried to explain during the process, that I need a lot of cells for me in this particular area twice a year, because we have 2 nectar flows, and at the end of the 2 nectar flows, I make splits. So I program my queen rearing timing to coincide with a larger amount of cells arriving out the cell builder and into the incubator for that period. But during the rest of the year, I sometimes leave them in the cell builder. It's just that I have finishers as well, which I'm going to talk about in this video afterwards. I'll show you my very brief management of finishers, but it's important because my finishers are also my nuke yards, my nuke boxes that give me brood. So I take out my started cells on day 2 of the grafting period, okay? And the bees have started those. They flooded that cell with raw jelly. And as I show in the video, you can clearly see what's been accepted and what hasn't been accepted. And then I gap them up into the cell bar so that I've got a complete cell bar. And if you look at the video, you'll see them going into the finisher. But when they're in the finisher, they will all get finished, as I said, because my finishers are strong. All they see is a cell that needs to be finished. They don't see it as a queen cell. It's a different role. They're just finishing cells when they go in the finisher. So if I didn't remove them from the cell starter, the cell builder, on day 2, what would happen is, after about 3 to 4 days, the amount of cells left in that cell builder that have been started starts to be reduced. Because no matter how strong you make it and how big you make the colony, they will always seem to go back to sort of a 30, 40, 50 cells that they're happy to finish. But at the start, when you first put them in, you get double or sometimes treble that, because there's this blind panic, and the blind panic ensues and they try and drop every single cell they can. And you go in there 24 hours later and yank those started cells out, you can actually profit, because all you do then is distribute them to an already strong finisher, but in smaller amounts. And because they're in small amounts, they all get finished and they're all still full of raw jelly. So there's nothing not to like. The other reason why I remove them, okay, as I said, I have a very brief period I can raise queens in. But if I don't go in to those cells after 24 hours, 1, I can't put the next lot in, and 2, if a queen got in and destroyed them, but I'd left them knowingly, right, they're fine till day 5, till they're capped over, I've lost 5 days of production, because it's going to take me 5 days to find out that those queens have been destroyed. And some people who raise queens this way have found that they have lost cells because the queen has got in on day 1 or day 2, a rogue virgin flying around the apiary, it happens, she's got in and she's destroyed those cells. I'm not saying my method is perfect, but for me it works well. I'm trying to highlight the fact that it's so flexible, you can do so much with it, that you can really profit from removing them early and push more cells through. You don't need 3 or 4 cell builders, you have lots of finishers, but you have one good starter. That's how I work it, and it seems to work well. The question was, what happens to the queen in this colony when you've taken her from here? Does she still want to swarm? And the question is, I couldn't tell you why she doesn't, but why I think she doesn't is because you imagine, this queen, when the queen was under this colony, she was getting everything she needed. She had a huge amount of nurse bees and bees caring for her. She had tons and tons of forage coming through the door, and it was at a time when everything else is going ballistic. It's a time where we said there was just a huge load of food coming in. But we knew the queen was at the point of swarming, so we moved her to here. And what happened here, we took away half the colony, and then we took away the forager bees, and then we took away a lot of the nurse bees, okay? So the queen has gone from being overfed and running out of room to having hardly any nurse bees, but just enough, remember, to cover the brood that was there, and lots of space. So she's going to change her manner. She's going to change the way she feels about things. She's going to go, oh my word, I've lost everything, right, let's start laying again. That's how I feel the queen feels. And what it does, it gives you an opportunity to stall her a bit. So when you do reassemble the colony afterwards, she doesn't immediately go, oh great, we can swarm after all. It takes a few days to get that feeling back. It takes a few days of being so overwhelmingly full of resources that she cannot do anything but want to swarm. She won't become like that straight away. So I have a question. What happens when you reassemble the colony? Do the bees fight, or do they get disorientated from where they were before? The question is good, but the answer is no, they don't. Because generally bees, if they're in the wild and something happens like their nest fell out of a tree, or they became a little bit disorientated, when you do a cutout, for example, you can put the brood and the bee and the queen in the box, and the bees find her again. It's exactly the same thing that happens here. So this was my setup originally. Feeder on top of the box. There's my hoverboard, okay? But I've said we only feed a little axis so that the bees have a small flow, but always have a flow when it rains, okay? So I'm just going to take this off and reassemble it to show you. So there's the front of the non-queen where it finished. This was the starter box I created, okay? Here is the queen in the box next door. So all the bees that remember that flew out here, flew back to here. I am the other side now, I know. But what we do is we remove this base temporarily again. We reassemble the queen-like section on this. You have to just bear with me, it works. So then I reassemble this part. The front goes back this way. But then what do? We put on the queen excluder. Because if this is going to be a finisher, the queen cannot come up from this queen-like section up through. Okay? So there you go. We lose the base, we don't need it anymore. Then this part contains the bees and brood that was the starter box, now becomes the finisher. Okay, simple as that. The bees that are coming back to here aren't that far away from here, and it's only 4 to 5 days since we changed their orientation before. So they'll find their way back, because you keep this bit clear, you don't put anything else here, they'll see the front of this, they'll recognise it, and they all go back in the box. They don't fight because at no time has the bottom box or the top box had a change of queen. The bees haven't had a change of owner. They've only been made orphaned while we put them through the process of raising queens. So when you put them back together, they certainly do not fight, I can assure you. Next question was, why don't I use the full Nico kit system, which is similar to the Genta system as well. So that the idea is that you have this cage, okay, that you put into a colony before you press it into a frame. And in that cage contains the Nico cups that I graft into, okay? So someone asked me, wouldn't it be better just to use the Nico system to allow the queen to lay into? So what you do is this cage, you take the queen and you put it in the cage and she then lays up into these cups. I agree with your sentiment and I agree with the question, but for me it doesn't work because it's quicker for me to just go and take a frame of eggs and larvae out that are the right age and graft with them instantly. I haven't got time to mess around and get my queen. It gives it another dimension that I don't want. It really is. But I'll have to say, hand on heart, I haven't used this method for my production purposes because it takes too long for me. I really can go and just graft quickly and get it done. If you can't see to graft, and if you're worried about, if you don't think you're going to be producing a huge amount of cells, and you want to try the method, do it by all means, because it's good that you try something different, okay? But I know for me, I get good results, and I just would prefer to graft straight into these cups. It literally takes me, probably from start to finish, grafting 2 frames, it takes me 30 minutes to get a frame of larvae out that are the right age, grafted into, it's really quick, you've seen me graft in the video, and then get them back in the cell builder. And I have missed the process then, because I don't have to worry about finding the queen, putting her in this cage and hoping she'll lay up in the cells in sufficient time. And then get that timing right so that I pop the cells out and pop them in the cell bars. And then I've got to put them in a hopelessly queenless setup. You see what I'm trying to say? It adds another dimension to it that I don't have time. I cannot spend ages messing around. I just have to do it. But if you're really finding it difficult to graft, by all means, have a go. Another really good question. What do I do with my cell builder when you finish with it? Well, it all depends on what you're doing at the time of year and what your flows are, okay? So I'll give you a couple of examples. Say it's August and I've just done my last set of grafts and I'm thinking, my goodness me, that was pushing it. I've got literally 4 weeks to get these queens mated before the ivy flow starts, so I'm pushing it. In this case, what I'd probably do is take this top box off, put it on a new base and give it a queen, because I know that there's resources in this top box. It's full of bees, nurse bees, which will become foragers very quickly because they're already probably day 8 to 10, and within another couple of weeks they'll be starting to really forage. But there'll be some foragers mixed in because they come up from underneath. So I know that this colony will be capable of getting enough food, but it needs bees and it needs a queen to lay. So I'm not going to risk it cutting it in 2 or 3 or 4, because I know I'm near at the end of my season. I need to have a queen laying there quickly. So I can still either give it a mated queen, or I can give it one of my cells. I've just finished with this colony. But I'll take this off anyway, and that then becomes a separate colony. If I'm in the spring, and I've done the same thing, and I'm thinking, well, I'm going on holiday for a couple of weeks, or we're not going to make any more queens this year, we're just going to do 20. And that was done in June. You can divide that into 5. You can make 5 nukes with that, because there's so many bees in that. There's nothing wrong with shaking a few extra bees out of here, providing you know where the queen is, because it's so populous, and you've got all that time to go before the end of the season, and you know you've got time for them to build up. So yes, it's all about using your resources wisely. There's some things in this video I just can't teach you that you'll only get from experience, and I've only learned when is the last time to do a graft that I can just about get away with. When is the last time I can split colonies that I can just about get away with. You learn that, but for me, what you have to do is think of when you would realistically want to make your last nukes up, and then you work accordingly with your cell builder. It's all about giving the bees enough time and working with them. As I said, work with them all the time. If you don't give them that time, you'll be frustrated because you make great nukes, but the queen just hasn't laid enough to make those winter bees, to get the colony ready for the winter. Because really, we shouldn't be doing splits in after July, August, but we do because it fits well with our production cycle. And also we help them because we can feed them, and we can put them ready to profit from the last ivy flow of the year, which is what we do. Someone asked me on the video, do I prime my cells before I graft? And the answer is no, I don't. I buy bags of cups, exactly like this. I just picked this one up yesterday from our big beekeeping shop. There's 1,000 cells there. That should do us for the year. But do I pre-fill them? Do I prime them before? You could prime them with a royal jelly, or you could prime them with sterile water. No, I don't. I take them out of the bag, I stick them in there, and I graft into them. You know the reason why I think I get away with it? Because those bees are so well set up and they're so desperate to exude royal jelly that even if you graft and you don't get as much of a puddle as royal jelly, when you scoop up that larvae, the bees are almost forgiving. They almost help you when they jump on those grafts in the way that they do, and they flood those larvae with raw jelly. That's what seems to happen, so they're quite forgiving. So we finished with the cell builder now. I've hopefully answered most of your important questions. It's not easy, I know, and my main objective there was to get people to have a go, and I hope you do. Because as I said in the main video, making queens isn't difficult. It's a two-part thing. Getting them mated is just as difficult. Have a go. Anyone can do it. It's not rocket science, all right? Just stick to the formula and have a go. The other thing I wanted to do was have a little look at the way I manage my finishes and how I go up, okay? And what I use. So this is my standard Dadon 5-frame nuke box, okay? I made these myself. I'm actually changing most of them now, so I've just bought 200 poly nukes that are Dadon 6 frames, because I found that 5 frames in the spring are virtually impossible to manage unless you've got a super to put on them. And when I mean a super, I mean a brood super, okay? So that is a brood super here. But what I'm trying to explain to you is what I do, how I get my supers ready to become brood factories and finishers, is I look at them in the spring. So now at the moment we are just the very start of March and nothing's really happening. We've still got a cluster here at the end of the winter. We've just had snow, we've still got a winter cluster. I'll have a look at them, see if they're okay, see if we're still queen right, see if everything's good, and then I will give them a feed probably mid-March, because it's the nukes that really suffer. A good overwintering nuke is like a time bomb, and if you don't manage it properly, come the middle of April, it's dead if it was hungry. They will collapse just like that. So I manage the feed till mid-April. Mid-April, we look at them. Usually they're really strong, looking absolutely fantastic, and then we think about what do we do? Do we transfer into a hive? Do we keep them as brood factories? If we keep them as brood factories, what I do is I give them a super. So this is one of my straightforward supers. It's actually just made of ply. It's nothing fantastic at all. All it is, it just replicates an extra body to put on top. But I don't just do this when they're big, when they're stronger. I might think, oh look, there's bees on all the 4 to 5 frames and some of them are coming on the outside, they need more space. If I do that, and if I put this on top there, what's going to happen? They might go up in the box, but more often than not, they still swarm. And the reason why? Bees don't often see above them. They don't see what you put on top. Sometimes you can put a super on and bees can still swarm. So what you do is this, okay? You take out 2 middle frames. That's your 2 middle frames of brood, probably hatching larvae or bees and brood, but brood frames, okay? Then you move the other ones in, like this. So you juggle them about a bit. And then I use these. These aren't actually partitions, but they're foam-filled fillers, okay? They're basically just blank off an area. So I've got one on the outside and one on the far side, okay? Like that. So I'm almost constricting the nest, but it's too small to put 5 frames brand new in. So I'm giving it a breathing space. I'm going to just put these down now. That's still my brood frames, okay? They'll just put to one side with bees on. That goes on. That's my super, okay? 2 partitions on the outside, and in goes my 2 brood frames, okay? What's the natural cavity for a European honeybee? It's a tree. And what shape are trees? They're vertical, they go up. The bees are now vertical in the box, and they are acting as though they have comb above them, beneath them, and not just to the side. So as far as they're concerned, there's no change, but they've got room. You've given them that space so they can expand. That's how I manage my finishers, okay? It's so important to get that right, otherwise you will stall them. They sometimes go up anyway when you put this on top, but more often than not, they're stalled because they've suddenly got a huge empty box on top. But if you stagger them, and you put the frames from bottom to the top in a line, they still treat it as a brood nest and there's no issue. The queen can go up or she can go down, whatever she wants to do. So, how do you manage them as finishers? Well, you've obviously got to harvest brood because you don't want them too strong, you don't want them swarming. So what I do is, when I'm using them as a finisher, I have the queen underneath here. So on goes, just bear with me a second. On goes my queen excluder. So I put the queen underneath, on goes the queen excluder, and back on goes the top. Obviously, I have to look and find the queen at first, but if I can't find her in there, I shake this all out again in front of the colony and usually find the queen either in the bottom or in front of the colony. So I know she's not in this top section. That then technically can be used as a finisher. But finishes, you have to manage the configuration frames, okay? So obviously, as the colony grows, I remove the partitions and I replace them with frames of either foundation or drawn up comb. But I often have drawn up comb because I'm running cell builders, and you end up with loads of it, all nice clean combs like that, just ready to stick back in. But when I have cells to finish, I like to have some brood in the top box. And if the queen is down beneath and she's laying like mad, and the brood's hatching out and you're not harvesting properly, what's going to happen? It swarms because the queen is in the bottom bit and she can get out. So you have to regularly rotate or remove frames of honey and put in. You then take a frame from the bottom that the queen's laid into and you bring it into the top. You must rotate because having open brood in the top of your colony next to where your cells are finishing is perfect because the bees are up there. The nurse bees are up there feeding those larvae, and then they feed your cells because they're finishing them. They don't really know they're queen cells, they just assume their cells to be finished because they've been started in another colony. That's the secret. Keep your colonies fluid, keep them moving, keep rotating that brood. Not too much, but to take enough out so that they don't swarm, but don't take too much out so they dwindle. That's the key. Don't forget, we're only running 10 frames here, but these are dadongs, so they're fairly deep. They're actually slightly deeper than your Langstroth, and they're certainly a lot deeper than your British Nationals, which come down to about there. So that's very basic management of your finishers, or whatever you decide to use. Remember, a finisher is just a box or a colony that can have a division in it so the queen can't get to it, and you keep it strong so that you can A, harvest brood from it so that it becomes a brood factory, and B, so you can put cells in that's packed full of nurse bees and they can be finished. I hope that's covered most things. There's obviously loads of other things I could have gone about, but I just wanted to get those basic things done. I really want you to raise queen cells. I really want you to have a go because it isn't rocket science, as I've said before. Do it, get organised and raise some great queens, okay? Thank you for listening and speak to you soon.